Welcome to Stories That Matter. Thank you for coming out on July 27th. We appreciate your attendance. Hope you're all having a good afternoon. Do I have to come over there and talk to you people?
Yes.
I'm sorry.
I mean, I'm going to give you a demerit.
I'll take it.
Okay? Boy, yeah, I bet there is. Yeah, really. Anyway, so. Excellent. How many have been here before? How many have been here to one of these Stories That Matters before? Okay, so a lot of newbies. Wow, neat, excellent, very good. Thank you. Excellent. But why stories? I'm gonna. This is a soliloquy, so I'm gonna kind of. Why do we listen to stories? Because since the beginning of time, we've been scribbling on walls and chasing animals around the forests. We've been telling stories, and that's how we communicate our feelings, our organizational culture, the expectations we set for each other. We shape our world views through stories, our dreams, our fascinations, and our lives together are told by stories. You do it around the dining table. You do it with your friends at work. You do it in formal settings like this. But they foster compassion. They allow you to see from another person's perspective about what their life is like, and you can touch and feel that moment for just a little bit maybe, and it allows you to experience another person and another view. So, what will happen today? You'll hear 5 stories, okay? You'll have 3 first, and then we'll take a break. Then we'll do some wildcards. And if you haven't heard about the wildcards, which I'm sure all of you had, there's all those little pieces of paper on your tables. So the wildcards are a 5-minute story. We put them in the box and we pull a drawing. So there's a chance that you might get to tell a story, chance that you might not, if you want to. But it's strictly voluntary. So you're welcome to, fill out the card and give it to one of us, and we'll drop it in the box there, and you'll be good to go. So, but they are 5-minute stories. They're true stories, just like everything else here. So if you want to do it, those are there, just fill them out. And if you want to fill one out and you want to be considered for a future show, maybe our September show, then you can fill one out and there's a little checkbox there. And you can do that too. Okay. We've heard these stories, the group here, well, actually Lee and I have heard them because we pretty much the only people that were here. And there's some that will make you laugh, some that will make you cry, some that you'll just go, oh my God, So what we're asking you to do for the next couple of hours is to kind of turn off the technology, open the ears, open your heart, open your mind, and listen to what's going to be happening around you and the stories that you're going to hear. Some of them will touch you. You'll be touched in different ways because of them. And before we wrote stories, we were telling them. So are you ready to hear stories about their moment of truth? All right. Our first storyteller of the night, Hans Horning.
So have you ever noticed that those people that can say, well, it seemed like a good idea at the time, always have good stories to tell? Well, here's one of mine. In February of 1965, I reported for duty aboard the USS Canberra, a U.S. Navy heavy cruiser that was in the Philippines. She was in the Philippines. She had just transited over from the U.S. on her first Vietnam deployment. I had just graduated from Navy officer school. I was an ensign. That's the Navy's equivalent of a second lieutenant. Brand new ensigns and second lieutenants aren't worth a damn no matter where they come from. You need some experience, okay? But that's probably why in the Navy, a lieutenant is known as an ensign. An ensign is known as being lower than whale shit. All right, I get it. It's not wrong. But I will say this. There is very little that civilian life prepares you for going to sea, joining the fleet, and being on a Navy warship. It's new. It's not like something in it. All right. The Canberra is a big ship. It's a heavy cruiser. Crew is about 1,100. We've got 6 8-inch guns and 10 5-inch guns. Now, to give you a sense of what that means, if the Canberra was down here in Courthouse Square, we could bombard Mayor with the 8-inch guns. And we could destroy Prescott Valley with the 5-inch guns. And whoever back there said, do it. I didn't hear that. I didn't hear that. All right, so that's a lot of firepower in one place. And our job was to cruise up and down the Vietnamese coastline, North Vietnam, South Vietnam, and fire shore bombardment in support of our troops ashore that were engaged with the enemy, try and knock out enemy supply and ammunition depots, marshalling areas, roads, bridges, and so forth. Now that might sound like pretty exciting stuff. Cruise up and down the shoreline, firing the big guns and so forth. But around the 30th, the 40th, the 50th, the 60th mission got pretty routine. Except when the 5-inch guns went into rapid salvo fire. Bang, 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 bang. That meant that they were firing at flashes on the beach. The bad guys were firing back at us, and we were in counter-battery phase. Okay, one day I'm sitting down in a wardroom. That's where the officers take their meals. I'm not on watch. The 5-inch guns go into rapid salvo fire. I say to myself, I want to see this. So I run up inside the ship, inside the armor of the ship. I'm not exposed, all right? I go up to the 03 level, which is about 4 flights above the water, 4 stories above the water. I look off to my right-hand side as I come out onto 3. I see a fall of shot, enemy shot in water. I think, all right, that's cool. We are firing to starboard. We're firing off the right-hand side. They're firing back. They're falling short. We knew what their range was. Ours was longer, so we stayed out of their range. So everything's cool. All right? So that means the shoreline is over off my right-hand side. Okay? I look over there, no shoreline. I look out the port side, shoreline. That means that that shot passed over us. We're within range. They got us bracketed, and their next salvo was probably going to hit us. All right, all this processing is going on in my head and so forth, and no sooner does it get it than BAM! Actually, it was kind of a crack. Gun smoke, gunpowder, smell gunpowder, and so forth. And we had just been hit with a 3-gun salvo. The nearest of which 3 projectiles was about 20 feet away from where I was up there in the 03 level. All right. Keep that in mind. Hold that thought, 20 feet. Going to give you a fast rundown here on ballistics. Okay? The gunners, the Vietnamese gunners, that gun is on the ground. They're shooting out to sea. We're about 5 miles away. But they can't see us. The gunners can't see us. Why? Because of the curvature of the earth. And this whack job that drives around here in Prescott with the, the pickup with the thing that says hoax on it, and the world is flat. He has never stood watch on the bridge of a Navy ship. I hope he's not here. Jesus. All right, so they can't see us. Now, so they're getting, the gunners are getting their targeting information from somewhere else. All right? So when somebody else located a different place than the gun is sending target information to the gun, there's a little bit of wiggle room all the time in there, okay? Might not be entirely accurate. Okay. All right, now, when you're shooting a gun out at sea and trying to hit something 5 miles away, all right, this is not like you line up the front sight with the rear sight, and pull the trigger, like it's a rifle shot. If you did that, gravity would take that right into the sea, right into the sea. So you got to shoot a long looping shot, like this. That means the shot has got to go up in the air. All air is not the same. Cold air is denser than warm air. Warm air has more water vapor, though. So temperature makes a big difference. The wind obviously makes a difference. We're a moving target. We're underway as we're firing our fire mission, so it's a moving target. And if all of that isn't enough, the world is still spinning. The world doesn't stop just because they're trying to hit us, okay? It's still spinning, and on a 23-degree axis. if any of those factors, those variables, was the slightest smidgen of a skoshi bit different, yours truly could have ended up as a red smear on the deck of the USS Canberra. All right, I'm up here telling the story. Obviously, that didn't happen. Life goes on. The ship was not terribly damaged. As that deployment went on, they started shooting airbursts at us. Fragmentation shells, they burst over the ship, rain shrapnel down on the ship. But that did even less damage, physical damage to the ship. But it drove us off, which was a win. As a win for them. That's just the way it was out there. I didn't think a lot about this, you know. And it wasn't until years and years later that I thought about all these different factors and variables and blah, 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 blah. And I thought, whoa, that was a bit of a close call there. All right, now, any story, I think, ought to have a point to it. There ought to be a message of some point, right? For a long while, I thought the message here was, hey, look, even in the simplest of situations, you know, should I go to the restaurant, I'm motivated. Should I go with my friend to Europe and say, there are so many variables, some of which you don't even know. Just do it. Just do it. And then I thought, you know, maybe all right for me to do that, but I don't know if I could recommend it to other people. Then I thought, maybe there's a little bit of divine intervention going on here, all right? Maybe the Almighty said, I can use this guy for something else, okay? It's not his time. But I dismissed that immediately because I knew that at the precise moment that the Almighty would have to intervene, and one of his staff said, what about Horning? He'd have said, who? You know it's true. You know it's true. Finally, the truth, over the years, the truth revealed itself to me. And that is that the guy up here telling you this story is dumber than a box of rocks. Who goes out sightseeing? We call it skylarking in the Navy. Who goes out skylarking in the middle of a counter battery barrage? Only somebody with a few screws loose in his operating system. That's who. So the only thing conclusive I can say about this story is, that seemed like a good idea at the time.
So ideas for stories come from some of the more unlikely places when we do themes. And I think for next year, March, when we do our first Stories of Matter, I think that's got to be one. It seemed like a good idea at the time. So Hans has been told a previous story. After he left the Navy, he spent a lot of time going up and down the eastern seaboard in his boat, spending some time in the intercoastal waterway. And he tells a story, and it's on Facebook, on YouTube. So if you go to the YouTube channel and you look up him, you'll hear that story. And It's a good one. It's a good one. When he said, when I asked him a bunch of different questions, he one of the things he was proudest of, he rose to the rank of captain in the Navy, which is a serious accomplishment. And which may be explained by the fact that when he was a toddler, he used to bang his head against the wall when he became frustrated and angry. So that there may be a causal relationship there. I'm not exactly sure, but anyways. So thank you, Hans. Appreciate it. Okay. So next storyteller, Pat. Come on up.
I think so. Hi, I'm Pat Kelley. I grew up in Queens, New York. I was an only child. Yay, Queens, yes. I was an only child, but I grew up in an extended Polish family. I'm sorry? No, Queens, Flushing. Flushing, yeah. Yeah, okay. Now you know. My grandfather was a carpenter, and he built houses he made a living by building houses, and built houses for the entire extended family. There were 14 of us. My grandparents, who I called Babci and Dziadek, Polish for grandma and grandpa. My parents, 4 uncles, 3 aunts, 2 cousins, and myself. We were very close, physically close, emotionally close. And I never had an outside babysitter. I was always cared for by family members. And on this particular day of the incident, it was a summer's day. My parents were working, and I was put in the care of my aunt and my grandmother Babci. It happened to be laundry day, which at that time was a very labor-intensive process. Everything was done by hand in the basement with 2 big wash tubs downstairs, washboards, no washing machine, no dryer. When the clothes were washed, they were taken up outside, hung on the line, and some of them were placed on the lawn for drying and bleaching by the sun. Since they were so busy, they entrusted my care to my cousin, who was 4 years older. I was about 4.5, so he was about 8 or 9. He had 2 of his friends over, and we played tag, and I was it. Now, next to my aunt's house was a house under construction. My Dziadek had been building this house for a family named Besko, so this became the Besko house. At the time, what had been done was a foundation, the first floor, all the studs, and the roof. The basement, the cellar, was unfinished. The cement floor had not been put in because it had been raining a lot. So the basement consisted of mud and water and rocks. Well, unfinished houses are a great place for kids to play. So my cousin and his friend said, let's go play tag in the house. So we were on the first floor, and they ran through the studs, and in the floor was a hole that was the size of a staircase that would eventually be built to have access to the basement. They were jumping over that, and I tried to jump, and I did not make it. And I fell through the floor into the cellar. My arms were flailing, my legs were up in the air, my little dress was up, and I fell flat on my back into the cellar in mud, water, and rocks. I could not move, but I could scream. I was screaming. My cousin ran around to get me down in the basement. A neighbor came, and I was crying, please carry me, carry me. But they didn't want to. I was covered with mud. They marched me back over to my grandmother, to Babci, who took me into those wash tubs down the basement, scrubbed me, washed my hair, all the while saying, "You're fine, stop crying, don't tell your mother." So she got me all cleaned up, took me outside. My aunt was out there, and they said, "Don't tell your mother. You must not tell your mother." And I thought, I don't want to tell my mother. I don't want to get my babji and my aunt in trouble. And they gave me the job to make me stop crying. They said, "Pick up the laundry off the grass." I did that. Every time I bent over to pick that up, my back, my head, my legs hurt a lot. But I finished the job. A little while later, my mother came and picked me up, and I did not tell her anything about the day. And I never told her anything about the day and what had happened. Put a bookmark there right at this second. We go fast forward 25 years. I lived in San Diego, and I was working as a teacher there, University of San Diego. One night, I get a call from my mom. Without preliminaries, she says, "When you were little, did you fall through the floor at the Besco house?" And I said, "Yes." It turns out all my relatives still lived in Queens. She was with them that evening, and my uncle, who wasn't at the incident but knew about it, said, "Remember the time Pat fell through the floor?" My mother knew nothing. She was very angry at her mother and my aunt for keeping this. A child had fallen, a traumatic fall. No one told her. But she did get over her anger. I was an adult. I was still alive. No problem, no harm done. Maybe that's not the case. Let's go back. After the incident, it was time for me to go to school. And you had to get a vaccination. You had to get a doctor's examination. My parents took me to our family doctor, Dr. Carter. He examined me, and he gave me my vaccination. And then he sat down with my parents while I wandered around the examination room looking at the strange things there. And he had some concerning news for my parents. He said, "Well, I've discovered that Pat has something wrong with her heart. She has a heart murmur, and I recommend that you take her to the clinic at Queens General Hospital." Now, Queens General Hospital was the first municipal hospital in Queens. It was designed to serve low-income people. It was opened in 1935, and by 1936, it was severely overcrowded. My parents worked full-time. My father was a butcher, my mother was a factory worker, but because we were low income, we qualified for Queens General. So I went there about 15 years after it had opened, and it was more severely crowded than ever. There were people on beds lining the hallways, people in wooden wheelchairs. If you've ever seen kind of pictures of old hospitals, this is what Queens General was like. It was almost like a third world clinic. If we got there early, we might get a seat. Otherwise, people were seated on the floor. People were crying in the hallway on the stretchers. A very disturbing situation for anyone, let alone a 5-year-old kid. So I did not want to go there. It was a horrible place. The doctors were very dedicated, though, and they wanted to know what was wrong with this little kid's heart. And they asked my mother, has anything happened to this child? No. Was she sick? No. They could not. Why did this child have this weird heart thing? They had ruled out an innocent murmur. Children have innocent, but this was something different. So they did tests. Blood tests were a normal thing. They involved, at the beginning, my mother holding me on her lap while technicians tried to find a vein in my skinny little arm. I screamed a lot. Cardiograms were consisting of straps on your wrists and your ankles and your chest, were very long. I held my breath, hoping that that squiggly line would be normal, so I wouldn't have to go back here. I had x-rays regularly. I had fluoroscopes. If you know what that is, a continuous x-ray where we were in a darkened room, doctors with goggles, while I stood on the other side so they could see my heart functioning. You may notice I have a glow about me. It's from all the radiation that I received as a child. At one point, they insisted I must have had rheumatic fever. So I took penicillin every single day for 2 years. Today I have rheumatoid arthritis, probably a result of my immune system being damaged at that time. I finally aged out of the pediatric clinic. By the way, Queens General presented the city with headaches over the years. At one point, one of the congressmen said it was a snake pit. This is how it was. And finally, it was destroyed and a new medical center was built there. Well, after I became an adult, I continued to have my heart checked, and I got a lot of diagnoses. Oh, it's a valve. It's your heart is thicker. One doctor would give me a diagnosis. The next one would say, no, that's not it at all. And I still, to this day, I see a cardiologist. But a few years ago, I myself was looking up what is wrong with this, my heart. And I found an article that said a traumatic fall in a child can result in heart damage. And to this day, and my family of 14 consists of one person, me. They have all died. They died in their 50s and 60s. I've gone pretty much past that. But to this day, I wondered if the truth had been told early on, if my mother could have told those doctors she had this fall, that perhaps I would have been spared as a child years and years of pain and worry because of the why.
Thank you, Pat. Pat Kelley. Okay, let's see. So we know that she was her grandparents were from Poland and Germany, so we know that part. Let's see, so we'll lose that page. And so she was, Pat has spent a lot of time in education, and I believe you taught sociology, right? Yeah, for the longest time. So we've had a couple of conversations, but not too much in depth, so interesting stuff. She believes that, when I asked her what makes her happy, she said happiness is being content with one's situation and possessions, which I think I agree with as well. Strange things, she was in Los Angeles in 1974, and she saw a Lamborghini Countach? Close enough. See, when I was taking foreign languages, I wasn't taking foreign languages. And she said it looked like a plane, so it became the dream car, and it's something she's always wanted but hasn't got. So if anybody out there, you have a spare, you can let it go that way. And let's see, she would be a cat if she could be an animal. I have there's some good animals in here I'm going to get to. Okay, so thank you, Pat, for the story. Appreciate it. Okay, our third story, and this is the last before the break, is from Johnathan Perpich. Come on up, Johnathan. JP.
What? I'm JP, and I wanted to start by thanking Lee and Stephen for letting me be a part of this event. I want to share a story with you about my relationship with my father. I am, and have always been, a drug addict and an alcoholic in the DNA. And my first encounter with alcohol was in the womb because my mother was an alcoholic. But my first taste of it came at a very, very young age. You see, my parents were renowned for throwing these parties, the Perpich parties, wild parties. And after one of these parties, the next morning, I was, I think, 4 years old at the time, very young. I wake up, and of course, I go in the living room. There's people crashed out on the couch and the floor. And I look around, and there's, empty cans and glasses and bottles all over the place. And I wanted to find out what all the hoopla was about. So I sneak around, and I, taste a little bit. I took a little sample of one and tasted a little like medicine. One even tasted a little like candy, but most of them, they taste like gasoline. I couldn't figure it out. But what I noticed is that most of it was the beer cans. And so I went over and grabbed a half-empty beer can. I slugged it, trying to get it down before anybody noticed. And about halfway through, I realized that there was an object in my mouth. And it occurred to me that someone had converted the beer can into an ashtray over the course of it. And you think I might have gotten the message then, but oh, no. No, there was more fun to come. And so my habit, my addiction grew and got worse and worse over the years. And I was terrified that I would become a hopeless alcoholic and an addict. And so I never said it out loud, not once. I was afraid that if I said those words that I would never be able to drink and drug again for the rest of my life. And so I kept it a secret from everyone, including myself, I guess. My father, my father was this remarkable human being, and when we were little and it was time for some level of punishment, my mother relegated the dirty work to my father. And so the routine was we'd get in trouble, he'd march us into our room, he'd close the door, he'd instruct us to, pull down our pants, turn around, bend over, but he would always lean over and whisper, "Listen, when I hit you, I want you to scream like you're in pain so your mom will hear." And then he would give us a couple of gentle whacks on the butt and we'd laugh. It actually became kind of a fun routine. But when I was 7 years old and I got caught stealing licorice from a local 7-Eleven, my mom had to come get me. She brought me home. "Wait till your father gets home." So Dad finally arrived, and she gave him the signal, and he said, "Well, you know the drill." So he marched me into my room, shut the door, said, "Go on." And I stood there, and I looked him directly in the eye, and I said, "Dad, if you're going to hit me, you're going to have to hit me in the face." And tears began to roll down his cheeks, and he just turned, and he walked out of the room. And later, he would like to tell the story this way. He would say, "Yeah, the kid wouldn't take his punishment, so he told me to hit him in the face, so I reeled up and I just whacked him in the jaw." And he would laugh and laugh like it was the funniest thing in the world. My dad was the king of dad jokes. So he went to college at USC, played football for their team, and he was actually the starting tight end in the Rose Bowl the year I was born, 1956. And he became a high school football coach. And so I was very concerned that at some point this high school football coach would discover that I was a hopeless alcoholic and an addict, and I was terrified that I would disappoint him. In my first year of high school, I lettered in 3 sports. I wanted to make him proud. And I loved sports. I lettered in football and wrestling and track. But at the end of that first year, I discovered theater. And I wanted to focus on theater. And so I decided I was going to quit 2 of those sports, wrestling and track, and I was going to become a thespian. Now, I was a little trepidatious about having to tell my father that I was going to quit these sports and become an actor. But I drummed up the courage one day, and I said, Dad, this is what I'm going to do. And that man just wrapped his arms around me, and he said, son, you tell me when opening night is, and I will be in the front row. And that was my father. Well, he knew that the 3 of us kids, my older brother, my younger sister, and I partied quite a bit, but he just had no idea of the extent of my problem. And so I tried to put up a good front, and as the years went by, I went to college at UCLA, and I started to drink and drug more frequently, more heavily. And then I met my first wife, and she knew that I did drugs, but she didn't participate. And so I had to keep it a secret from her. And 6 months after we were married, she was diagnosed with cervical cancer. And after 4.5 years of surgeries and chemotherapy and radiation therapy, she died at the tender age of 37. And I was drinking and drugging the whole time. And so when she died, she was up at her mom's house, which was about a half an hour away from where we lived in Culver City. She decided to spend her last days there because she knew her husband couldn't take care of her. And so I went home to our house that day she died, and I dove into a very deep and black abyss. And it got ugly, and it got very dark. And a few years in, I'm online doing some crazy shit online, and I meet this woman, and she lives in Arizona, and I was in LA at the time, and she decided to leave her husband, her son, her daughter, and come live with me. Why not? I mean, I had my own television series, I had a maid, I was living the high life, lots of partying. And as soon as she moved in, things got bad. Or they got worse, much worse. And she quickly went through her divorce money and got sick from the drugs, and she went through several jobs. And about 3 years after she moved in, we're having a rough time of it, and we kind of were fighting, which didn't happen very often, but that day was pretty bad. And usually if she was angry at me, I could just wrap my arms around her and make everything okay, but she was having none of it this day. So anyway, I hit the wall. Literally put my fist through the wall, and I had never done that before, scared the crap out of both of us. And so it didn't occur to me later that by hitting the wall, I was speaking both metaphorically and literally. And something happened that day. I was on the phone with my father, my dear father, and I was whining and complaining about my life and how bad things had gotten and trying to con him out of some money so I could call my dealer. And Beth marches in the room. She says, "Why don't you just tell him the truth?" And she walked out. And I don't know how to tell you this. I don't even know how to say it, but these words just came out of my mouth. It wasn't like it was me who said it. They just came out, and the words were, "Dad, the truth is I have a drug and alcohol problem." And Beth came back in, and she said, "I'm so proud of you." And we cried together, and my dad was weeping with me. And he said, "I love you, son, and I want you to call your sister." My sister, who is the worst drunk I've ever known in my entire life, and I have known a few, I promise you. And as a matter of fact, this is the same sister who died just a year ago, strapped to a bed in Riverside County because of wet brain. But this is also the same sister who on that night had 9 years clean and sober. And I called her, and those words came out of my mouth again, and she said, "Well, now you're free." I said, "What?" She goes, "Yeah, you never have to drink or drug again for the rest of your life." I said, "How the hell does that work?" She said, "You'll find out." So I also called a friend of mine. And that same friend, 6 months earlier, had called me and said, there are people who love you, JP, and they want to save your life. They're afraid you're going to die. And so we want to send you to treatment. We'll pay for your treatment. And I wasn't ready, so I declined. But that night, after being on the phone with my dad and with my sister, I called him and I said, is that offer still on the table? And he said, oh yeah. As a matter of fact, we want to sweeten the pot. We think you didn't go the first time because you were worried about Beth and not being able to pay the bills, so we're going to pay your bills and pay for your treatment. And people loved me that much. And so 25 years ago, I entered Tarzana Treatment Center in a place outside of Los Angeles. I spent 30 days there, and I left, and I haven't had a drink or a drug since, and thank you. Thank you. And started my new life. And it has been indescribable. Today, I share my life. I need to take a moment. I share my life with this lady, this beautiful human being named Cynthia, who many of you know because she was in the last storytelling event. A woman who is so far beyond my wildest dreams, a woman who loves me for who I am and not for who she wants me to be, a woman who brought this remarkable creature into our lives, this beautiful young lady named Lucy, who is her daughter and now thinks of me as her parent. And today, my God, I am richer than I have ever been in my life. And I have known abject poverty. Can I afford the second taco at Jack in the Box? And I have known great wealth. Should I get a limo or hire a driver? But today, because of my relationship with my father and the people in my life, I get to just relax and trust the current. And I remember being at my father's service, and there were so many people there who loved him and talked about what an incredible man he was. There were people from way back, before USC, people he knew at USC, people who had just met him 2 weeks earlier on the golf course, who came to his service to say how much they loved this man that they had just met. And I remember sitting there thinking, I got to be his son. And when I went down to visit him, in that, after I'd heard that he'd had the brain tumor, I got the call that he had lapsed into a coma, and I get down there, and my brother's there. It was his 50th birthday. And he said, I can't deal with this, man. I can't watch this anymore. And so he took off for Mexico. My sister was there, and she said, I can't watch this. And so she split. So it was just my father and I in that beautiful hospice room overlooking the valley in San Diego, and I got to hold his head in my hand. And I got to be present with him, which I could never do before. And I got to kiss him on the lips when he took his last breath, and that was a gift. And when I heard that he was sick, and I raced back down to Del Mar, and I came in the house, and I collapsed in his lap, and I was weeping, and I said, Dad, I cannot do this without you. What am I going to do? And he said, son, we all have to go sometime. I'm just glad that I'm leaving someone like you behind. And I got to hear those words from my father. Thank you.
Hard to follow that. One of the things that JP is most proud of is the 25 years clean and sober. So. He would, if he had an animal, he would want to be an owl. He thinks he's a bear, but he'd want to be an owl for the wisdom and all that kind of stuff that goes along with being an owl. I don't know, but we'll have to see. His definition of happiness is a word I never heard before. Ataraxy. Am I saying that right? Ataraxy. Anybody ever heard that word before? Ataraxy? No? I had to look it up. I had no idea what it is. So, a state of mind that is characterized by peace and serenity and untroubled by worry. So I hope you get that, and I hope all of us get that, you know? We're going to start the second half of the program with the wild card drawing. So I have the magic box here, but the person who's pulling the names is over there. We talked about this. Come on. That's all right. Okay, so remember, wild cards, 5 minutes. So at about 4 minutes, Lee is going to pull out her 44, and at 5 minutes is going to blow your head off. Okay? So. Okay. Thank you. Oh, okay. Cool enough. All right. Ready? Okay. If everybody behaves, we might be able to do 2 or 3. Okay. Okay, the first wild card, Paul Abbott.
So 5 minutes might be a little quick to tell this story. Someone's already telling a story by the sound of it. So this is about brotherhood. And it's about 3 brothers, me being the middle one. And I start the story by a little fill, which is when I was 3 years old, my mum decided it was time to go to work. And as a 3-year-old, I had no idea what that meant. So she dropped me off at a total stranger's house. And as she walked away towards the car, I felt my belly follow her, snaking around the cars, snaking past the person who was looking after me. And as she got in the car, it snapped back. So that's the fill. So I then had this experience. I knew what it felt like to be separated. So during the summer holidays in London, parents would send their kids off to camps or to summer schools or whatever. But my parents decided that they would put us in these summer schools, okay? But my little brother, who was probably about 3 years old, was too young to go. So same age as me, at the time of my first experience of separation. He was sent off to this person who, he didn't know who it was. My mum didn't know who this person was, but that was her job. So he would come home at night and tell his 2 brothers his experience, which was that she would lock him in a room and leave him there all day. She'd give him food, put him back in, lock the door. So he would tell his brothers, but he didn't tell his mum and dad. Not quite sure why, but we decided we were going to rescue him. So, and God knows how we knew where this house was. All right, we're 5 years old and 9 years old, right? I was 5, brother's 9. So we decide we're going to leave the school that we're in and find him. So we walk for miles and miles, and we find this house. And back in those days, the keys were on a little piece of string, right? We're talking 1965, right? So we know where the house is. We go to the front door. We lift up the little, letterbox. We're looking through. Keys on the string. She's in the kitchen, way back in the kitchen. We can see her, right? So pull the string, put it in the lock, undo the door. She's still in the kitchen. We know he's upstairs because he's already told us, little 3-year-old Alan, right? So we run up the stairs, unlock the door. So we get him out, go back down the stairs, look round. She's still in the kitchen. Close the door really quietly, and we run, right? So 3 little boys running through the streets of London, feeling freedom, you know, and so we spend the day on the train lines, laying there watching the trains roll past, right, all day. So we get home. We can't understand why my mum and dad are freaking the fuck out, right? Where's their kid? This 3-year-old kid, where is he? Oh, here he is. And little Alan's looking up, having the time of his life, right? And so there's a knock on the door. The woman, frantic, comes to the door, and my parents look at her, look at little Alan, right? And they tell her, just leave, go. And when we told them the story, we expected them to be really angry with us, like, well, you just kidnapped a kid. This woman was frantic, but they didn't. They bundled us all up and said, well done. Well done. Thank you.
That was fun. This is more fun.
Keep these people waiting. Oops. Okay.
All right. All right. Amy Lansa.
There we go. My name's Amy Pyatt, and I'm a 4th-generation Arizonan. I was raised on a ranch in southern Arizona, and I went to high school in Tombstone, Arizona. So this is a true story. So I had 2 brothers, and our ranch was located right next to Fort Huachuca. And the base commander at Fort Huachuca contacted my grandpa and said, hey, we have some Green Berets that need to train, and the topography of the land around the ranch is similar to what would be in Vietnam. And so my grandpa agreed to allow these Green Berets to train there. And so one afternoon, this personnel carrier pulled up, and a group of Green Beret soldiers jumped out of the car. And their captain or their leader came over, and he spoke to my grandpa and my parents, and all of us kids were standing there because there's these soldiers, and we were pretty impressed with that. So they said, look, these guys are here to train, so they are not to come to your home. Do not render assistance to them. Don't interact with them. They shouldn't interact with you guys. So just let them, they're training, It's like, okay, all right. So we went along with that, and my brothers and I, we saddled up one day, and we were supposed to be looking for cattle. And we went up into this little area, and we got to this high spot. We looked down, and we were just looking, and we could see some camouflage netting. We're like, what's that? So we rode down there, and we found a whole supply of K-rations. We're like, whoa, this is great. So we jumped off, we threw back the netting, and we packed up as much as we could take with us. And I imagine that we were in the sights of these guys. They're thinking, these little sons of, So anyway, so the day after that, we started riding with saddlebags because you could pack more in the saddlebag. So we got back, so we'd ride, we'd do whatever it was we were supposed to be doing. But then we go back to the saddle house when we done saddle and turn the horses out and everything. And my grandpa's like, what the hell are all these K-rations doing here? We're like, we found them, And so we would go through them, but we were looking for the chocolate pudding, the applesauce, the peaches. If there was any other things, it was, green beans. So I know that we were hated by these guys. And They weren't supposed to interact with us, but we saw one guy come up to the water faucet next to our adobe house there. And my mom was outside hanging clothes, and she had her hair in curlers, and she's out there hanging clothes up, and she's this little ratty house coat she had. And she said the most beautiful man she'd ever seen in her whole life walked up. He had no shirt on. He had he had all his gear. Good morning, ma'am. And she, what? So anyway, at some point, after the period of time, I don't remember how long it was, 30 days, whatever, 2 weeks, this personnel carrier showed up. These guys just came out of the brush, flipped us off. No, no, they came, they all just walked up, got in the thing and took off. And they went to Vietnam after that. And we were their trainers. So I imagine they were very successful. That's it.
Okay, back into the box of destiny. All right. Mallory. The fates are with you.
Hi, I'm Mallory Gish, and my story is about driving a school bus in an old Cummins engine bus, and I think I was like 735 to bid, so I got the worst of all the worst buses. So anyway, my assignment was to go pick up Jefferson High School, and I get over to Central and 42nd, and this is in LA. And I see, like I'm in a high-profile vehicle, and there's a lane, 2 lanes beside me, so if anybody crosses the street, the people on the right of me, because I'm so high up, are not going to see if they're illegally crossing. So I had a green light to turn green, the arrow, and here comes these 2 men across the no crossing, and I start hitting the horn. Like, no, I got these 2 cars over here. I was concerned that they were going to possibly get hit, because they're not going to see them, and they're going pretty fast anyway. So the one guy, when he gets in front of my school bus, he's like, and I'm like, you're going to get hit. And he crawls underneath my school bus. He crawls underneath. And I'm like, I say to the other guy, can you get your friend out from under my school bus? In that situation, I was like, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? So the light turns red. Now I have a few vehicles behind me, and I'm begging his friend, get your friend from out under the bus. Get him. And he's like, no. And I'm like, so now it's another green light, and I'm still stuck there. I can't turn left. And now all these people on the right and all the people building up are starting to honk the horn. And then I got an idea. I was like, I can't legally move this bus with him under there. There's just no way. And I knew that. So I was sitting there for a 3rd light now. Now you can imagine a school bus, 38 feet long. And that's a small street, just saying, it's very narrow. It's not like wide open lanes that we have out here, or even like from where I live. So about the 4th light, I decided, Mallory, you have a button right there by your foot. And I was like, yeah. I put my foot on that air horn. I put my foot on that air horn in the decimal, and they don't even put those air horns in those school buses like that anymore because that's a 1970-something air horn, and it sounds like the air horn you have out at sea. Wah! And I'm just sitting on it. In fact, if you're in a car and my foot accidentally hits that air horn, you're gonna go, oh my God, what's she doing? So I just sat on it. I didn't release it. I just sat on it, and everybody's going, oh, what is she doing? And I just sat on it. Finally, that guy comes crawling out. He comes crawling out, and he looks at me, and he's like, and he starts doing this to the windshield, and I said, get out of here. And I was like, Mallory, that came to me. Thank you. Whoever gave me that idea, that button was the thing that saved me from being the fifth light. Anyway, that's the story.
Mallory, at one of our first shows, was it, I think, told a story about her life as a bus driver and how she saved a bunch of kids from a terrorist attack in the valley, which was a really good story. And you can see that story on our YouTube channel. It's a good story. Okay, so back to the regular program. Thank you, Wildcard people. And thank you also, everybody that put their name in the box. I know there were a lot of you, and if we could, spend the rest of the afternoon, maybe someday we'll have to just do wild card storytelling. We'll see. Anyways, so just a quick note, at the end of the program, we want to do some photos with everybody, so all the regular storytellers and the wild cards, please hang out, and we want to take some pictures up here with you afterwards, so don't disappear, okay? It's very exciting. Okay, anyways, so our next storyteller, Carl Grimsman.
This is a story of how I almost killed my wife's boss. Many years ago, when I was still a young man, I lived with my beloved wife, Julia, in rural upstate New York. Julia worked at a public library in a small city south of us. She was somewhat older than I and had been by then a librarian for the better part of 20 years and was an accomplished reference librarian. An opportunity came in the form of a job opening at a college in a small city north of us. She was intrigued. There's a difference between the public library world and the academic library world in procedure and collection and clientele, but she seemed to be ready for a fresh start, and even though she would be discontinuing her state pension buildup, she took the plunge and applied, was interviewed, and was offered the job and accepted it. She and I went up there one sunny afternoon after that, hobnobbed with the director, toured the big airy building, which as it turns out was designed by another old friend of hers. What I left out was that she had an old friend that worked there and who suggested she get that. So he designed that building when he was an architect back in Baltimore. So she had two little connections there, and it seemed like this was going to be a beautiful arrangement. And the job came with a special welcome dinner with a certain benefactor of the library, Sebastian Maynard Welch, who even the library was named for him. And so there we were, pulling up at the big Victorian house on a cold, wet January night, evenings precisely at 6 p.m., ushered in through the big oak doors and enjoyed drinks and hors d'oeuvres in the high-ceiling living room, flanked by leather-bound volumes and a crackling fire, and then invited into the dining room for a candle-lit dinner prepared by Mrs. Higgins, the cook, replete with linen, crystal, little silver bowls with salt and pepper at each setting with little tiny spoons. There were finger bowls and pineapple upside down cake for dessert and lots of good conversation. It was an elegant gateway into Julia's inaugural year at the library in her new career, so to speak, which stretched out smoothly through the spring and summer. But one day in the fall, she came home in tears. She just had a disastrous evaluation from the director, full of trumped-up charges, like, I don't know, she was late often or didn't get along with the professors, and none of it was true. She somehow found out that her hire had been designed to be for only 1 year, that they had brought her in there in the interim to let the person that they really wanted to get free to come in. So she was in pieces, having redirected her career and having the moral outrage of her false evaluation besmirching her record, by which her contract would not be renewed. I, as a guy, wanted to fix it. But there was nothing I could think of to do to rectify the situation. I was working as a carpenter at the time. Next morning at the job site, at coffee break, I spilled the story in a really bothered way to my boss and the other carpenter of our small crew. We were sitting on the floor in the house that we were remodeling, and my boss, straightforward and matter-of-factly, says, "Well, in a case like that, you have to kill the guy." He was from Long Island originally. Kind of a hard-nosed guy. What? Was he serious? But the way he said it, he looked out into space as he said it, almost like he was reminiscing. The other carpenter put a stamp on it by turning to me with a quick nod. "Kill the guy," I said. "You have no choice," my boss said. It's what a man's got to do. Now, I knew there was a code of men, but what the hell? This was pre-internet, of course, and I didn't even have Robert Bly in his book Iron John to tell me how a man should act. About all I had was movies like The Godfather. So it seemed like a horrible idea, but the fact that I respected these men, and then there was the matter of Julia's honor to be avenged. So I started to plan the deed, even though the whole thing seemed surreal to me, and the thought of it made me sick. So, how would I do it? Could I possibly get away with it? He was a shorter man, 10, 15 years older than I, slender, but by no means frail. I kept feeling my hands around his neck. I had strong hands then, still do. What would I do with the body? I thought of a rest stop, a kind of pull-off in between the work and home with a thick patch of woods behind it. Maybe. I proceeded for weeks to try to plan this, but I seemed to be losing steam. It was going slower and slower, like I was in a little steamboat going through a channel that was getting narrower and shallower and more full of weeds, till I hopped out and had to pull that boat like Humphrey Bogart in The African Queen, until the mud and rushes got so thick that I could go no further and my murder plot was stuck. This was aggravated by the fact of Julia was being treated worse and worse at work in the form of silent and overt abuse, coupled with the fact that they had actually offered her 3 extra months in the interim, presumably so that other person could get there, which she had taken, partly out of stubbornness and partly to keep our income stream going. I don't know why the director and others had to be so mean about it. Maybe it's like with chickens. I had done some farming, and I witnessed how if a chicken is ill or injured, other chickens will begin to pick until sometimes with disastrous results. Well, she come home finally telling about the Christmas party. It was late fall now, and this was going to be a catered evening affair at the library for staff and spouses, to which she said, "I'm definitely not going." And I said, "Yes, we are going," suddenly galvanized as though reanimated from the dead. I said, "We're not going to let them get the best of us." That was only part of my reasoning, because in my mind I was thinking, wow, this is a chance for me to do something. I don't know what yet. But I said, we're going to make an appearance and then we can go. And so that came up pretty quickly, and off we went. She acquiesced to that, knew I had some kind of force behind me. And in the car on the way up, dark, of course, at that hour, 45 minutes on up there, we didn't do much talking. And I'm not sure that I even then knew exactly how my move was going to go. But I do remember spending the time gathering myself, steeling myself, centering. We get there and park. We go in. The room is very dim. Christmas lights twinkling in strings around the room. Holiday music playing. Many eyes upon us. Like, what's she doing here? And what kind of nerve she had to show up. And she points over to, there he is. I said, good, I'm going to talk to him and then we can go. So I pad on over and I say, Paul, I'm Julia's husband. He nods in recognition and I'm standing sort of beside him rather than straight on with him, kind of looming over him, almost touching him. And I say, Paul, I just wanted to say that everything that's happened with hiring her and her evaluation and the treatment that she's having, has been having, I said, that is what it is. I said, but I need you to treat her with the utmost of courtesy and respect for the rest of her days here. If she tells me that that's not what's happening, then I'm going to take it personally. It's going to be personal. Do you hear me? And he nodded. He seemed nervous, but he played it cool. He's a professional. So I didn't know exactly what effect I had. But it worked. It was smooth for her, tolerable for the next few weeks. They laid off. And then she came home one day, having been relieved of her job, feeling very much relieved, and with a nice fat check for around 6 weeks full salary for the rest of the time that she was agreed upon. And it wasn't long before she was back working at the public library in the small city south of us, and they were glad to have her. As for me, well, I reflect on it and feel a certain satisfaction that I felt then that has reverberated to this very day. A sort of settledness on the affair and a certain self-validation that occurred there for me. And ultimately, I would say it was an initiation. Yeah, into manhood.
I don't know, I'm kind of fond of option one there. You know, like that. I like that little, the rest stop thing in the woods, and yeah, I don't know. That's just me. I don't. What the heck? Okay, Carl. Thank you, Carl. Carl obviously has been a carpenter, landscape artist, poet, and novelist, which I didn't know about. So, very good. You could maybe read some of his stuff at open mic night. He's from New York originally, and I don't know, how long have you lived here? 29 years. Okay, so that's almost a native. So. I asked him what animal he liked, and he said zebras, because they have cool stripes and they run very fast. So, who can tell me what color a zebra is? Who thinks they're white? They're white. Okay. Zebras are actually black with white stripes. So that is an interesting factoid. But the point of this is that the striping on the zebras, and this has nothing to do with you, Carl, at all. So sorry, I'm just going off on a tangent. The striping is designed by nature because their main adversary, the lions, have generally poor eyesight. So when they stand together as a group, they appear as a mass that the lions cannot pick one out to attack and kill and eat. So the striping is a defensive mechanism designed by nature. So there you go. So next time on Wild Kingdom. Okay. Yeah. Okay, so anyways, our next storyteller is sitting right there. And Ginney Bilbray, why don't you come on up?
My name is Ginney Bilbray, and this story is called The Weight of the World. So I, like many women, have struggled with weight. I struggle with what the media tells us we should look like. I struggled in high school. I struggled in the military. I struggled after having a baby. I have struggled my whole damn life. And I have done things that I am not proud of, an attempt to manage that weight that has been detrimental to my mental health. Now, in junior high, I dressed exactly how I wanted to. I dressed in eccentric clothing with wild makeup. I mean, Cyndi Lauper was my fashion icon. And I didn't care what anyone thought. But then came high school, and things changed, and people changed, and what you looked like, especially weight-wise, seemed to matter. And when you didn't look like your friends, insecurities start to settle in, and you feel less than. And I got to high school, and my girlfriends were a size 0, a size freaking 0, all right? I also remember when Guess designer jeans came out in a size 0. All of my friends fit into them. So my family, we shopped at Goodwill and other charity shops. And if we were really lucky, we got to shop at Kmart and put things on layaway because my mom was dressing 4 kids. And sometimes layaway was the only way. And $100 designer jeans were not in my family's budget. So, a side note, I had a crush on a boy in high school for 4 years. And he was a football player. And he used to call me Swick, which was my last name. And we're sitting in our civics class, and it's the last week of our senior year. And he leans over to me and says, "Hey, Swick." And I say, "Yes." And he says, "What's your first name anyway?" Devastated. I couldn't believe this was happening, and I really thought it was because I wasn't a size 0. So enter some self-image issues. So I get out of high school, and I go to Flagstaff, and I get a job at a very popular bookstore, and life was great. But I go to work one day, and I got laid off. And I didn't know what to do. So I had no family to fall back on and no real money. So I go for a walk across the street from the condos that I'm living in, and there's a strip mall. So I start walking and looking at all the stores, and I notice a recruitment office. And I walk in, and guess who's in? The Marines. That's right. So I walk in and I say, "I need a job." And he says, "We're hiring." And off I went to boot camp. So in boot camp, I learned a lot of things. And my drill instructors were very, very strict on what we could eat in a place called the mess hall. Now, I grew up in poverty, and this was the most food I had ever seen. I'm talking steak, chicken, potatoes, rice, salad, soup, everything. All of it forbidden. My drill instructors were tough, and boot camp was tough. And I found out early on that if you were overweight, a fat body, your clothes would be striped white. So everybody knew, especially the guys in the mess hall. So I learned very quickly that I did not want to be part of that group. So I get out of boot camp and I go to the battalion, and I'm like, things have got to get better. And I find out that weigh-ins are public. So they shout your number out in front of the entire battalion. All right, so enter anxiety. So, I mean, if I thought high school was tough on weight, the Marines were tougher. And give me a break. We are the Marines, all right? Physical fitness is top priority number 1. I mean, we're throwing grenades and using machine guns and just the works. And we had constant uniform inspections, and they made sure you did not gain an ounce. And I started having trouble with my relationship with food, self-harm, etc. So I make it out of the Marine Corps, 4 years honorably discharged, and I think I can finally breathe. And I get married, and I very quickly become pregnant. And I gain 100 pounds. That's right, folks, 100 pounds. Now, the doctors were all like, don't worry, it's baby fat, it'll fall off, don't worry. Liars. I would battle that weight the rest of my life. Now, my weight has been like a roller coaster, up and down, and I have tried every diet known to man. Jenny Craig, Weight Watcher, Slim Fast, cottage cheese and banana diets, starvation. And a little note, I have bipolar. And I got so manic one day that I found a sharp object, and I carved F-A-T into my arm. Now, I scared the crap out of my husband. I scared the crap out of myself. And I said, I have got to get this, I've got to beat this. So I am fortunate enough and privileged enough that I was able to get the help that I needed. So the world is crazy, social media is crazy, the media is crazy. And all of the ways that I thought I was supposed to look went out the door. And I finally realized after all of these years that the number on the scale does not equal my self-worth. Yeah. All right? Thank you. Thank you. And now I wanted to say that I love me. I love all of me. Thank you.
Ginney, we just met, a month ago, maybe 6 weeks, give or take. And you showed up at the open mic, I think. Yeah. And then we ran into in a restaurant in PV, which is like, is that girl who was at the open mic? I don't know. Anyways, Ginney's worked in theaters in Arizona for a while. She's appeared in local theater productions of Into the Woods in Chicago. She's skilled in improvisation. You hearing, Liz? Okay, pay attention. She's worked in designing wigs and makeup for theater. She holds a Bachelor of Arts in English Literature and a Master of Arts in Interdisciplinary Studies with an emphasis in theater. She has an upcoming one-woman show, and this is going to be in LA, right? It was featured at Hot Off the Press in LA, and we're going to put it on locally. Okay, working out the deals. Okay, and the show is called A Pretty Normal Life, so watch for that when it comes about. And she is a librarian at the Prescott Library? I'm a librarian at Yavapai College. Okay. When she was younger, she left her apartment in California to drive to Arizona and drove for a few hours and somehow ended up back at her apartment where she started from. There's no idea what she did for a couple hours. And her animal is a giraffe. Yeah. And why is it a giraffe? Because they're so graceful, and the eyelashes and all that stuff. But what about the giant blue tongue? Part of the package? Okay, good enough. Thank you, Ginney. That's the show for tonight. I have a quote that I want to give to you, and this was written by Marianne Williamson. Anybody familiar with her? She ran for president a couple of times. Yep. And she said that every problem emerges from the false belief that we are not separate from one another, and every answer emerges from the realization that we are not. So I'm going to leave you with these two words, these two F words, friends and family. Be safe out there, everybody. Thank you for coming.